I'm sorry.
This is gonna be like the most casual working group meeting.
Alright, so this is the Hardware JS working group. Welcome everyone who wasn't here for the last one. The basic goal of this group is to recommend changes to like Node.js or whatever that will help us do more awesome hardware. I feel like the current focus has been on Node serial port and just like compile steps in general. We feel like compile steps are a real barrier to adoption for a lot of people, especially like Windows users. You have this all Visual Studio and all this other stuff, and it's just a real pain in the ass. So, we kind of want to get rid of that. That's like sort of our goal, I feel like. We had our first meeting 2-3 weeks ago, something like that, I don't remember. And so we're still pretty new. We're kind of still figuring out what we're doing. I guess at this point, for those of us who are here, let's go and talk about we all had a bunch of action items. Let's go and talk about those. One of the things we did was we created a list of all native modules that we use in our hardware development. So I added the ones I knew, which is basically Raspberry Pi what I worked on, and of course, serial port. Was there, were you, was anyone else on the previous besides yourself? I usually don't.
Yeah, definitely.
That's right, you were there. I slept 6 minutes. Alright, bring it closer. Alright, yeah, we can just pass this around. My action items was, I added these hardware items, or native modules that we use, because, we want to get rid of them. So Raspberry IO and Node serial port are the ones that I encounter pretty regularly. Another thing, this is like a non-tech aspect, but so we're a new working group. There's a number of like sort of matters of business we need to get together. So the one I'm taking on is getting a code of conduct in place. What I ended up deciding to do with the input from a few others is to basically took the Nodebot's SF code of conduct, which I helped author some time ago, which is based on the Citizen code of conduct. You're familiar with that. That is, I have a pull request open that's in review. We're like fleshing out a few details. So that's where we are on that. The other thing was I was asked to reach out to some people at Tesla and get them involved. We've gotten a few people who said they are interested. They're not here at JSConf, so maybe the next meeting. But we definitely have lined up some key people from Tesla.
Relevant to that point, relevant to the point that Ryan's made as far as Tesla, I am actually a member of the new Tesla Foundation steering committee. So I can also stand as a representative for Tesla. Not quite as nicely as it would be for the long-standing members. Still enough to say that it matters.
Cool. So should I go over my action items then, since I was here?
Sure.
So my 2 action items were, one, getting together what I had about the Node ecosystem project, because we want a central repository for Node class information. This would include, but not just be Johnny5. So Johnny5.io is a good place to reference, but not the only system. So what I've got is I pulled together what I've worked on in the past. It's been a little while. Mostly it's a database full of all of the Node bot, either thin client, itty-bitty computers, Johnny5, or native Node bots, all the information about them. And all I'm doing now is starting to pull together a GitHub repo to actually start building the site so that we can have PRs and we can have issues and we can actually get other people in this working committee on that website. So in the next 2 or 3 days, I should have a repo launched with some basic ready-to-go stuff, including the database. I'm using just SQLite for right now, just because it's easy to ship locally. We'll figure out where we actually want to host it when we get the site going, if we want to actually host it somewhere when we get the site going. Since it's small, I don't think anyway, that's technical stuff we can deal with on the repo. My other action items are to list the native modules I use. I listed Node serial port, the one for BeagleBone.io, and there was one with Tesla has a native module, right? Like kind of, yeah, right. So I listed Tesla's, right. The Tesla 2 though was going to have a native module, right?
Tesla 2 code will very likely, my hope is that there will be native module bindings written to speed up working with the GPIO.
Yeah, either way, definitely I use Node serial port and the ones that are viewable in IO because, yeah, and phone script is just super fun. And, yeah, so, which reminds me, I'm going to add to my action items that I need to reach out to Jason Pridner about at least keeping an eye on our working group because he's actually really interested in making phone script much more primary for Beaglebone than it is right now. So, all right, that's what I got. So I guess we're on the new business?
Donovan?
Oh, right.
I don't have any action items.
Okay.
Just, I don't know if it's appropriate now, but the list of native modules, Noble, has, I don't think it's Noble's native module, but the Bluetooth LE stuff seems to be more and more prevalent and more useful as Bluetooth 4.2.
I think we have something to speak to that,
And
too.
yeah, absolutely. There we
Just a
go.
little bit.
Anything to add?
So
You don't have to.
we get the cross-platform. Correct me if I'm wrong. Cross-platform does not really exist for the Bluetooth LE stack, and it's kind of a little bit different. There's different maturities in Windows and Linux and OS X, and so that's not. I don't know if that's an easily solved thing, or if you've solved it in Noble completely, or.
So Windows is not there yet. It's just Mac and Linux.
So no Windows, but Linux is there. Mac and Linux are good. Okay.
Have you had any support from Punch bringing? They've done a lot of Windows-based stuff. It's been like months on it.
Chris was supposed to look good.
She mentioned Node.js.
No.
Anything to
I mean Node serial port, Node.js. The PC Arduino. I can't remember. I actually can't remember. It's like
Well, that's right. PC Arduino has one.
yeah, it has a native module that, like,
I'll list it as PC
which is
Arduino.
very similar to the thing that I want Tesla to have, which is just like thin bindings that speed up GPIO access.
All right, so I think that's kind of all the sort of old business. We had some chats last time talking about Node serial port. One of the big issues with Node serial port is that we need control over the IO control options. That's why it's currently a native module. This is why we can't just do typical file system writes and things like that. So, kind of one thought we've had is we need to start. And Windows of course complicated with this, but maybe we need to get more options into the Node or TTY module, so that we can just go and set those straight from JavaScript. Then there's no compile step. And this will definitely be the biggest win for us, since probably little over half of the platforms used for modern Node serial port. So if we get this very one specific thing fixed, then all of a sudden the most common platforms don't need compile step. So that's probably the best short-term, or I feel like this is probably the best short-term win. But long-term, there's still a lot of others, like Raspberry IO and Beaglebone, that have native stuff as well that's not doing specifically serial port things. It's using it for other GPIO. And so, something I've been turning over my head, this is still a very rough new idea, I don't know what this will look like exactly, but there is a module out there called Node FFI. Is everyone familiar with that? Not heard of it? So, are you familiar with what FFI in general is? Okay, so it's short for Foreign Function Interface. And it's basically a mechanism for loading a library from somewhere into your language with dynamically runtime. It's essentially, it's like loading a DLL or a shared object in C, in that you say, okay, here's a library somewhere, right? I want to look up this symbol in that library, which this is something the OS gives you. You look up the symbol and it has this signature, and import it, and then you can call it without having to have. In C, this is typically done. You don't have to have a header file or anything like that. It's kind of difficult to use. If you've ever loaded a DLL in Windows, it's a real pain to do, but it is very powerful at the same time. And this is what FFI is. But FFI is typically used to call things from one language that's written in another language. And these bindings exist for a lot of different languages out there. So the Node FFI module brings us into Node land. So you can use the Node FFI module to call something, and clib or standalib or something like that, or any C library that's installed in your system, without having to compile any C code for it. So this is pretty powerful. I feel like this may be a potential win, but there are some problems with it. There's two problems that I've identified with it. The first of which is that, well, this is still an external module, and it still has to be compiled. It still is doing C code stuff. So we still have a compile step. Now, in this case, we're compiling one exact thing. So a solution to this is, well, bring that into Node Core. If we bring an FFI-like system into Node Core, that would allow us to call any C library we want from Node without a compile step. But there's another issue with that, and it has to do with the API. The API is very, very direct right now. I mean, I say there's this C function, or C++ function, and I'm going to call it, and it's going to do whatever it does. Which means if this is a long-running function, it's going to block, because there's no notion of asynchronous stuff in C++. That's a construct that you build on top of it. It's not in the language itself. And so most of the time the Node way is, we write some C stuff that's synchronous, but it's in like a background thread, and we do some thread signaling and stuff like this, which is usually handled, of course, but nonetheless, there's like threading involved and things like that. With Node FFI, though, we can't do this. It's just, we can directly call it, and that's it. So we would also need to make changes to the Node FFI API. Whether we write our own or extend the Node FFI, I don't know what that would look like. But this is a possibility. That idiom is very, very set. The way you take a synchronous module using NAND or something like that, and you make it asynchronous. That's very, very well defined. I feel like it should be possible to have some way of saying, make this async. Here's a callback, call it whenever it's done. So that could be a possible win for us as well. But like I said, this is a very early idea. I don't know what this will look like yet. I need to kind of work with it, play with it, prototype it. But I don't know, it's a thought I've had. If anyone else has thoughts on that?
No, I think it's very interesting. It's the first time I've thought of that as a potential solution to one of the many obstacles that we have. That's thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
A lot of brain churn going there.
Now an appropriate time to get feedback.
Absolutely.
I've worked a little with Ruby's FFI, and so the only problem the major problem I've had with Ruby's FFI has been with Nokokiri. Nokokiri is for XML parsing, and it uses libxml, which is really good, except it has some very broken versions that ship with all of our computers. And so the only way they've been able to get around it is by providing their own pre-compiled stuff with their module that comes along with it, and then giving you the option, though they keep changing what that option is, to it's been awful, to use system libraries if you know they're good, and this and that. And so they've had to work around bugs. So now we're no longer shipping C code, but now we're relying on C code that needs to now be shipped in other channels. And so while there isn't a compile step, there's still I really hope that this version of whatever is a compatible one that does what I want and this and that. And so I don't know if Node FFI has any answers to that. And that would be something to think about up front. I would hope, because it's been a source of many, many tears for new Ruby developers, and in the Ruby land, they've had an awful experience.
I can't really speak authoritatively to that because I'm not an FFI expert. But I don't think I don't think they had an expert or an answer to that. I've done some FFI work before. There was actually one point in time I wrote a Raspberry Pi library, hoping to tap into PWM and other things like that, which has been problematic for a long time for the Raspberry Pi. And I wrote this FFI version, and I got it working. But it was like the asynchronous and other things. I ended up having to abandon it. Before I could even start worrying about that problem, I ran into other problems and I had to abandon it. So that's a really good point. That is something we should consider. I do feel like that's probably maybe the case anyways.
Well,
I need to think about it. That's
Graphics Magic, right?
Yeah.
So Graphics Magic has many versions and does many different things with images. And so if you need your Node module requires Graphics Magic version whatever, now you need to you have to have version checking. You need to make sure it's the right library. You need to make sure the error messages are good. And I don't know if that's okay. Maybe that's fine. you're gonna have the similar problems if you shell out. But it is totally possible, and I don't know that it's the right way, is to bundle that stuff. It's now to like send pre-compiled stuff out, and then we're back into the build stuff again.
Yeah.
But maybe we're not building it. Maybe we are. With Node Serial Port, we ship a pre-built version for most OSs. And the error messages, when it doesn't exist for your OS, are very cryptic and confusing, and lots of bug reports come from that. But it works. When the build is working, it works. And so I guess the hard part is installation. It's not, and so I don't know that this completely solves that installation stuff. And I also don't know, like with Node Serial Port, FFI on Windows would still need to ship C code, probably precompiled C code, just like we do now. So I think it might solve some problems in some situations, but I don't know that there's no. Are there libraries that we could use FFI for Node Serial Port to talk to? Can we just talk directly to Windows, to whatever you require in Windows to use Serial Port?
I don't know the Windows side of this. We have to ask Chris this.
Okay.
Windows is the wild card in this, and unfortunately, it's
one thing I think is important to think about for Windows. Windows 10 is going to be a free upgrade to everyone. Windows, like Microsoft, has never done this before. So if you look at like the charts for like usage and like market share, I think it's something like 55% of everyone's on Windows 7 because like people just didn't go to 8. But I'd be really interested to see in the next 6 months, once Windows 10 comes out, what that adoption curve looks like. Because if you look at OS X, for example, where there have been free upgrades, there's way more people, like a much larger part of the market share is, like on the latest version of OS X. So if like we kind of make that as an assumption walking in, and work towards like supporting Windows 10 as a first class thing, I mean like doing this kind of robotics and dealing with serial ports, it's pretty low level, and I think it's pretty fair to consider it like a greenfield thing, and trying to do legacy support I don't know, it just seems like a lot of extra work. And like focusing specifically on like kind of the greenfield Microsoft technologies may make there be less of a barrier to entry.
It might also be worth reaching out to Windows, especially not just because of Windows 10, but because they just forked Node to run on Windows 10 on ARM. So they're obviously moving into the hardware space from a Node perspective, be that forking or however they want to do it. And I get the feeling having someone who knows what's going on at Microsoft, not just all of us who have read the press releases, might be handy. Because if we can even get a glimpse as to where Windows is actually going, that might help us. Plus, it wouldn't hurt to have a Windows perspective in the sense of all the problems that we've been having. Again, if they're fixing these problems, we don't have to. That's something that may affect our work. So I think we should really reach out to someone at Windows who might have at least a glimpse as to what's going on further than we do. That might be worth it. Who? Oh, that's right. He'd be perfect to talk to.
He's not necessarily the person from the team that would know, but he'll tell us who to talk to.
All right. One of us should pull him aside at some point and talk to him.
Well, in
All
this,
right.
what's his name?
Yeah, right.
Matt?
I'm not sure.
Ray Bango.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like old jQuery.
He knows everybody. I think all of us at this table at least have one conversation with him. He's one of those people that just talks to everybody.
Yeah.
But still, I'll put that down as an action item for you to talk to.
It sounds like
Rick.
is it
Or
Rick?
Rick. All right, cool.
Rick, yeah, that'd be great.
All right.
But this is also, I think it touches on another like related area of so going back to what you were saying, Miles. This like sort of early adoption in numbers that are not huge, but not small either. OS 10 early adoption, that's something we used to. Well, plus also, I think most of us probably use Macs here anyways. So of course we're going to cover that. But like the Windows early adoption, it's kind of like the IOJS early adoption. It's a pretty small amount. Like the number of people running IOJS 2 in any environment is about, I think, 2% was the number I had heard recently. Which is very, very small. It's something like, we don't...
2% of all Node and IO?
Yeah, of all Node and IO. Production, dev, whatever, is about 2%. It's 0% for Node. It is 0% production as well, but it's 0% for Node bots because we don't support it. Yeah. Right, yeah. So, IOJS 2 they upgraded V8, and so nothing compiles on it right now that's native. But this goes back to that. Yes, thank you.
I feel like we segued away from talking about pre-GIF a little more, like identifying what we feel are the problems with it, because I think any path towards, like, people not compiling things is precompiled binaries, even like, you guys made the point, we still have a compile step for at least a FI library. You can't depend on native libraries, so maybe you also have to compile them. So I don't know, I mean, we have a lot of experience like working with that. Like, how has it been for you guys?
Yeah. What the recommendation I would make for Node.fy, whether it's Node.fy specifically or if it's a new API, we should get that into Node Core. I think that's the solution, because then we get rid of the compile step. But yeah, what does that look like? That's still.
Well, yeah. So I mean, like pre-GIF as it is now, like what are the issues that we see? Like what are the things that we're running into? Like you mean like there's not a precompiled version for Raspberry Pi, right? Of no serial port, so like you still have to install it. And it takes forever.
Yeah. Well, and the other issue is like with IOJS 2. It comes out, it's a new version of V8, and so the interface changed and nothing compiles anymore. So even if whether the pre-compiled version or not is also relevant because no one can do it. And so it's like we're always having to chase this bleeding edge with native modules, and that doesn't really happen in the JavaScript side because the JavaScript API is a lot more stable. It just comes out to who controls the APIs and what's the purpose. Google is not trying to make a public API necessarily, but Node.js is. So.
I agree that the FFI like caters towards being able to like maintain binary compatibility. I think that's great. I was just wondering, it sounded like based on how we like kind of work through those problems, that we still have this like precompiled binary floating around somewhere that we need to make sure people have the right version.
Well, like I said, this is all an idea. I feel like if Node.fy is brought into core, there's no more precompiled binaries anyway. Well, the precompiled binaries there are is the external library, assuming this is not a system library, that's not part of CLib. So like the Node serial port issue, that's CLib stuff right there. So that's on every system already. But yeah, it depends. But you're right. It depends. Is this a third-party library or is this, I guess, a first-party library, for lack of a better term? But an OS-level library. Okay, so maybe this is something we need to research. Is for the native modules that we are using, but also that we want to use in the future. Kind of looking forward. How many of these are basically a part of CLib or one of the CLib variants versus some third-party code that's not on most OSs or is haphazardly on shipped by default or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know that Node serial port actually solved a bunch of these like versioning and dependency cross-platform issues with the help of the hybrid developers. Precompiled binaries, so if compilation fails, it falls back. Or it suspects it will fail. Set of checks.
It tries precompile
So
first.
the fact is we know that these builds can exist. It can be done, and it can support as much as it can support. So
It was crazy to set up.
but it's there. So the point that I'm trying to make is that like
We have a model to go off of.
right,
That's
if
fair.
nodes,
Yes.
so like let's roll back. Second, pop a stack back to the original thread conversation. The original mention in the very beginning about node serial specifically. That was part of node. The same build of like front matter and materials necessary to just be reused to create the binaries necessary to ship pre-built binaries that have these. That's actually already there. Well, the problem is like, what about other platforms, like other native modules? It would sort of level those in the same that Node serial port is level. Then we can talk about like just rolling them in like as is and get sort of blessed by the community support that core also gets. Or should also.
I'm just remembering from our last meeting, didn't Chris make a suggestion outside of Apple New Year, technically. But the for no serial ports. I'm not really processed. Are things that could be exposed in libUV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're really talking about the change to libUV.
Yeah, so to summarize kind of Chris's thoughts last time, I remember this conversation pretty well. It's just there's certain control options we need, and if we had those in JavaScript, we wouldn't need a pre-built binary at all. And so the win there
For serial port.
for serial port,
Pretty much nothing else uses
Right.
those, right?
Right. We talked about the possibility of bringing Node serial port into core. I felt like Chris didn't really like that idea, and I kind of agree with that. Is that it's too high level of an API, and that's really if we could get these options necessary so that Node serial port doesn't need a native module. That's the better approach from a what do we want core to do, basically. And that's the impression I got of what Chris was saying.
I have to say the native build approach, and there's Node serial port was modeled after two other libraries who have a native build for all Windows, Linux, and Mac. It's not free. No, it's not. Well, maybe it is free. It's very finicky. We have 3 different build services. We have some branches that need to be constantly rebased just to be up to date. It's not reliable. And it breaks and nobody notices. There's a lot of it's way too hard, I should say. There's no tooling. And so we're literally, we're using these online services that provide Windows build servers. We're using Travis for Linux, and there's another service to use for the Mac. And that's not, it's not great, and it doesn't always work. The meta, I feel like it's almost the wrong approach, so I have to agree. Like getting rid of it would be great. I know we can't always, but maybe that's not the problem this working group needs to solve.
Yeah.
So, can I make a suggestion that will maybe lead us towards a resolution for this particular meeting? It sounds like we're convening on something. I want to state it. Maybe we can wrap it. The things that Chris brought up, the things that you were saying about all we need to add are control options.
For Node serial port, yes.
You're saying there's only a few small changes that need to be made or exposed to libUV. Why don't we action item it to get with some libUV developers and talk about it? Just
All right.
open up a dialogue with those team members and see what kind of reality. And sort of the same thing with what you're saying, the control options. I know we need to discuss that particular aspect and to say, present our case and not and approach it such that we're not saying we want this, but how can we work together to make these things happen?
I think that sounds great. Does anyone know if any of the libUV folks are here?
I have no idea.
I don't either myself.
But if we just make an action item that says
Action item, get with the libUV does and talk about the feasibility of these changes that we want to make. Quotes, how can we work together?
One more question. One more suggestion. Would FFI solve the need for Noble to need any of its own C? No?
There's 2 issues. So, Linux actually has a GPL license, which is terrible. So I actually forked out to a process just to stay away from this. And on Mac, it actually links to XPC connection APIs. I don't know if those are pure C, but I guess it's cool.
The first issue is that there's a licensing issue. Most of these C libraries are GPL, and this is actually I think an interesting question of it's being loaded in dynamically. What are the legal ramifications of that? I feel like there's been a lot of discussion around this in the past, and it's kind of a murky area. Once again, I'm not a lawyer, so that's an interesting question that needs to be solved. How do we get around that? And I'm sorry, can you repeat the second part?
So for OSX, it links to non-standard C library C connections. So I don't know.
Okay.
Works well.
It's a different C-lib? That's right, there's 3 different?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's not part of the C.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, so going a little more to how like FFI links, if maybe this will help answer your question, is it's anything that is, well, on mixed systems, it's anything that's basically registered through LD. So anything that you can pass a -L flag into, GCC, you pass into FFI. It actually passes that exact name into FFI. It uses the same name resolution mechanism. So is that, what do you think? Does that answer clarify?
Yeah, so
That'll work? Okay, cool.
What was the end result?
So it seems to me like the big question for using Node.js or something like that is really one of licensing. That's the only concern left, correct? That you're aware of? Okay, so yeah, we need to find an answer to the licensing question.
Okay.
And who should we talk to about
Richard
that?
Stallman.
Aside from... Yeah.
So does anybody here know if you can dynamically load GPL code without being GPL? Legal, in a legal.
Licensing.
All right, so this is an action item. We should find out. There's an answer. This is a big thing. I have a friend I can ask.
Yeah.
Oh, do I have an action item?
Yeah.
I have an action item.
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay,
have a
great.
Unix Greybeard I can ask. He's in his early 40s. There's no beard, but it's fine. He's fine. He's part of the FreeBSD team.
And from a technical perspective, the mechanism is pretty much identical to loading in a dynamically linked library.
Okay.
So,
What's the second? And that's it? And FFI would work otherwise?
yeah.
All right, that's awesome.
So the second item was null. It's just like
That we're aware of, at least. I mean, I feel like we need
Well,
to...
yeah, there needs to be
there's a
more
lot of it.
research,
Yes,
I'm sure.
definitely.
Yeah. But Noble can handle FFI, so if FFI, I mean, because that does buy us a lot, buys us something anyway.
Yeah. But also, like I said, we need to work on the APIs. I mean, I abandoned mine
Yeah.
because there's all these
Absolutely.
long-running
Absolutely,
synchronous
100%.
stuff. And
That's solvable.
yeah. You know what? I'll take that on as an action item to maybe do a proof of concept for a new FFI or something.
Okay. For an async FFI interface.
Yes. Or at least start looking into it.
Alright. The other thing we should probably do, I did take a bit of a roll call. I think we're supposed to have attendance on the note, right?
Right, yes.
Right.
I
So I
forgot
got
about that.
most of y'all's names. What is that? Actually,
Pina colada.
I missed that.
What's the action item?
She just ordered one. We
Determine
need to get
what
that,
Jacob is.
we need to get that in the meeting video.
I put you down. Yeah. And then, are you participating? Okay.
Okay.
All right. No. Rick proposed it, but didn't take order. So let's do the action.
Who said assigned to?
All right.
All right.
Blame the guy Donovan.
It's
You
fine,
actually
it's
wanna
fine.
blame it? Okay. Cool.
Here's my action item right now.
Any other new business?
Anything anyone else want to bring up? All right, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. Thanks everyone for coming.
All right.